Dibao was implemented in China in 1999, first in the urban areas. Later in 2007, it spread to the rural areas of China. Describe how the program works.
Thank you. Dibao's English name is Minimum Livelihood Guarantee. So the purpose is to guarantee a minimum level of livelihood for the very poor, very needy. So it started in 1993 in Shanghai as an experiment, because back then there were huge state-owned enterprise reforms, so many workers were laid off. And the Shanghai government didn't know how to deal with these vast groups of laid off workers. And they had the money, they have some political autonomy, and they said, we will try this welfare program. They did, and it was quite successful. So a few other cities followed suit, and it became clear that it's needed and it's serving the purpose. So by 1999, all the Chinese cities, over 600 of them, adopted this policy, and it was not until 2007 this policy was adopted in rural China.
So basically, Dibao, from the way you've described it in the past, is a means-tested social assistance program. How is it any different than similar programs, for example, in the U.S.?
It's not hugely different. It's a means-tested welfare program. So anybody who wants to get this benefit will need to apply, report their family income, and then if your income is below the local welfare standard, or called the Dibao line, you qualify. Then the benefit amount you are entitled to would be the difference between your income and the local Dibao line. So there you see the Dibao program is very localized. That means that the Dibao standards are set according to the local living standard. So if you're from Shanghai or Beijing or Shanxi, where I'm from, the Dibao lines are different. So local officials have quite a bit of autonomy to decide how to run the program, how to screen the applicants and determine eligibility. Another rule that's unique for Dibao is it's very much tied to the Chinese household registration system, which is hukou. So you are either an urban resident or a rural resident. You could be a migrant, but that would mean you are not entitled to the urban benefits if you move from the rural areas to live and work in the urban areas if you don't have the local hukou or household registration status. So that excludes the migrants from the Dibao benefits.
And that's a large population.
It's huge. It's hundreds of millions of people right now.
We'll get into what you found as far as what's working and what's not. But you know, overall, has it been a successful program?
It's certainly a mixed story. As you would find many other welfare programs around the world, Dibao has been serving its due functions. One is to guarantee a minimum livelihood for the very poor. So those who are at the bottom of the income distribution have been benefiting from it. Poverty reduction effects have not been in the entirety, but modest, so people do benefit. And those who are in deep poverty, who are in severe persistent poverty have benefited more than others who are closer to the Dibao line.
Okay, that makes sense. But again, I have read that you believe Dibao works better than similar programs in other countries.
So many scholars have done comparative research, myself included. In terms of targeting, Dibao makes some errors, which means Dibao covers some people who do not really qualify for the benefit and leaves out some who really qualify. But that exists in many similar programs because targeting is hard work. If you ask me how much money I make, I may not entirely tell the truth, or I may have a fluctuation in my income sources. Right. So it's not easy. So there are targeting errors, but Dibao is doing relatively better than many other similar programs in developing countries.
And why is that?
I think it's the double-edged sword in the Dibao program because it's implemented very systematically by the branches of the Ministry of Civil Affairs in every locality. So these civil servants are dedicated to make this program successful. So they work hard and they mobilize the local communities to participate in the screening and selection and verification of Dibao eligibility. So that could work to their advantage. At the same time, it's a very costly process, right? So your personal identity and family resources, even health conditions, could be exposed to the community so that it reaches some level of accuracy. So I would say it's a mixed story.
When you look at the successes of Dibao when it comes to people living in deep poverty in China, how are you measuring that success? And are we looking at education outcomes and health outcomes and the ability to be more socially mobile afterwards? Or is this a temporary assistance program? Do you see that people are able to be lifted out of poverty, or do they remain forever on Dibao?
So in my work, I look at several different aspects because there's no one clear measure that could judge its success. In terms of poverty reduction, as I said, Dibao does reduce poverty, especially deep and persistent poverty. I also look at how families receiving this benefit use the money. So most of the families do use the money to help with their healthcare and education costs. And especially in both rural and urban areas, healthcare is a major challenge for many of these families. In urban areas, many families also use the Dibao money to pay for education. So that's a good story because people are using this money to invest in human capital. But that also showcases the lack of sufficient healthcare support and education support for these families. Another aspect I look at is social participation, how Dibao recipients feel in terms of happiness, life satisfaction, how they participate as a social citizen. And in that regard, it's not a very positive picture. Dibao's screening is quite stringent, lengthy, and stigmatizing. So if you apply for Dibao, your name will appear on a list to be posted in the neighborhood so that your neighbors and community members can give feedback about whether you truly qualify for this benefit.
Now that is very different.
That
is an aspect of the program that would be different than the similar
from
assistance
many
here.
other countries.
Yeah.
That's very true. And that's partly characteristic of the socialist system. So in China, if you ask people about it, it's not great, but it's not a big deal either. So people are used to their privacy to be exposed, and in order to get the welfare benefit, people, including the non-recipients and the recipients, would say, yes, we need to expose our information to be sure that we should truly qualify.
Which might inflict a great degree of shame on
Well,
a certain type
very
of
much
person,
so.
on a lot of people, I would
Very
imagine.
much so. That's one of my concerns, especially for children. I mean, it certainly applies to everyone, but if you are a child and if you go to school and your family receives Dibao, your Dibao status will be known by your peers, by your teachers, which may mean that you can get additional benefits, but you will carry that label, and it's not a great one.